Penny for your thoughts, friends. Real men don't podcast, but maybe they should. I'd like to start off this week's Penny for Your Thoughts by saying that I am sorry for the clickbaity title. Y'all deserve better than that. And to be honest, I felt a little slime when I wrote it, but I decided to just let it ride as a sacrifice to the dialogue gods. For what it's worth, I think the concept of a real man is so incredibly vague and intellectually lazy, but for the purpose of the conversation, we're just going to go with it. But please know that this channel will never become an elementary school toxic gender war space. This week, I'd like a penny for your thoughts on what's happening in the cultural landscape that seems to be saturated with insecure, hyper-individualistic performances of masculinity, so much so that there are a huge amount of people currently raising the alarm about how men are moving to conservatism and putting misogyny back on the menu. We're at a time where we are seeing content pushed into our faces that is increasingly anti-women.
You could make the case that grape is bad for certain people.
No.
For certain people.
No, it's bad for everyone.
No, it's only bad for certain people.
Here, there's women, you agree, who have orgasmed during SA.
That has nothing to do with what you say.
Bro.
That is
And my take is, what if the good, and for the lack of a better term, we're going to use good, I should probably say not detrimental to society, but maybe affirmative to it. The good men, what if they're not lacking in existence, but lacking in visibility? What if the good men, the thoughtful, emotionally intelligent, community-minded men, showed up in the influencing circuits with the same energy as the red pill pushers? What would our collective future look like then? Before we jumped into what I personally feel like is the vacuum that is good men being in public view, please let me say this. I am not a pick-me. I am not pandering to the menfolk. I just happen to have been blessed with the gift of proximity. I know good men, like genuinely good men, like help an old lady across the street, put your life on the line, constantly reflecting, physically and emotionally present type of men are in my life. And because of this, I am keenly aware of their existence. They exist. I have seen them. And because I see them, I know for sure that the bar is not in hell, even though the internet keeps trying to convince me otherwise.
So I found this video on YouTube on a response of a video I made with me having a desire to want to be a husband and a father.
34, I have no children, I'm not married, and I'll be 35 in May. And the older I get, the further away I feel I am from being a husband and a father. And not because I can't have kids, but because when I was younger, I
realized I was gay.
But lately I've been clocking this weird little trend thread that's popping up anytime I see a woman say something that a man doesn't like. It's usually some variation of, you better be nicer to men or we're just all going to go to the right. We're going to go to the right wing. This is why you lost the election. This is why men are leaving to the right. This is why men are going to the right. Okay, we're going to get into the breakdown of the political spectrum in another video. So I'm using this word, the right. Please don't think that I'm saying that everyone on the right is a certain type of way, but this is the threat that I am seeing pop up in comment sections. And I had never really clocked it or seen that before. And I'm not saying that any of these traits that I'm thinking of are exclusively associated with being on the right, but I've just noticed that this is so weird that this is what is being used, usually as a justification for some really insane, really far out behavior. But it makes sense because being a nonchalant womanizer, cheating, lying, grifting, none of these things have ever really been seen as a bad thing or taken as seriously as it should be taken. But I firmly believe because of the influence of our current administration, the sentiment seems to be booming right now, okay? As if that's the only way to be cool if you're doing shady shit. That's somehow the only way to find meaning. And the moment that there is a disagreement, now there's a threat to move to the right. It's giving do what I want or men will vote for fascism. But more than that threat, what really gets me is this quiet assumption that lives underneath all of that. And so my question would be, do these men know that there are men out there who don't feel any connection or kinship to the manosphere rhetoric? Do they know that? Do they know that all men aren't just pre-right converts waiting to be activated by the fresh and fit intro like a sleeper cell? Do they know that there are men who are not only genuinely good and living out their principles and also at the same time have zero desire to go down that pipeline or fall for the red pill? Not all men are on the brink of radicalization. Some have already stepped off the path entirely. I know men who are emotionally literate, self-reflective, and uninterested in controlling anybody. And then it dawned on me, maybe they don't know. And maybe this isn't about existence or reality. What if this is a visibility issue? What if they themselves are thinking that all men are at the core the same. And men who have objectively good lives, good relationships, meaningful loads that they are carrying while living outside of the red pill right-wing circles don't really exist. Maybe the good men don't look like they exist because they're not posting. They're not streaming narratives or playing on the totally normal insecurities of young boys and turning it into something else.
But for every guy who ever opens up to his girlfriend, about 2 months later, either the relationship ends or she's cheating on the side. As much as she says that she'd love for you to open up, she truthfully, subconsciously doesn't want to hear your problems.
They're not making money off your children. They're just living. They're loving, they're showing up quietly, reliably. But if all we are fed is the loudest man in the room, the grifter, the guy whose masculinity is basically an MLM scheme, yeah, I totally get how someone would start to believe that kindness is extinct. Again, not because it's true, but because we aren't seeing them online in the same frequency as the Andrew Tates and the debate bros of the world. A couple weeks ago, TikTok's weekly beef session landed on Deontay Kyle, who I've talked about on this channel quite a bit, but it's because I really want him to win. He uses his Grits and Eggs podcast to discuss everything from outdated gang culture norms to community accountability.
You may not harass women. You may know how to take rejection. The majority of men that most women deal with do not. And you are accountable for that as well.
Being a better man than you were the day before. He brings in insight not only from his life, but also from what he's learning raising his own kids. But that did not stop the storm coming for him in episode 68 of his pod when he was discussing modeling accountability within your circle. And I think what makes me so excited about his podcast is we are starting to see a shift happening where more men are speaking out in this way. And it's not only bringing in, breaths of fresh air, but it's showing just how much we are in a publicly good dude desert. Justin Scott, JJ Williams, Lamont Hill, Sam, aka Good Trouble, Bradley Thornton. There's like 10 other people that I can think of off the top of my head. Different men, all different backgrounds, sending messages of accountability, vulnerability, only to be called simp and panderer while simultaneously living the lives that men say that they dream of. But that aspect is kind of ignored because you are nice to a woman. It's like there's a preference for the performance versus living out the actual ideals that lead to a good life. We have become addicted to the theater. And I know that we want to blame stuff on social media, but this isn't a new thing. My dad would tell me stories about how growing up in the 80s, his own friends, or at least guys that he thought were his friends, would make fun of him for not wanting to share his girlfriend with the group, or that he was a simp for treating the girl that he was dating with respect. Tale as old as time. And it makes sense because so much of what's popular right now isn't masculinity. Again, it is theater. I've got the starter pack. This is who I need to be. It's straight up culture war rhetoric and empty vulnerability being used as brand strategy. We have created a reward system where shouting your pain is more profitable than healing it. Because if you heal their pain, you have no more customers. Where high value is something you market, not something you practice. But my question, dear watcher, is what if we flipped it? What if the most visible male influencers were dads, teachers, social workers, coaches? Can you imagine podcasts where tenderness is actually not the punchline, or the grounds for accusations of being a panderer because you could see something from someone else's perspective? A lot of times we talk about this behavior, we call out this behavior, and it's usually met with something like, oh, that doesn't happen in real life. That's just online. And for the most part, I do think that that is true. But to that point, what's even scarier for me is the reality that at the end of the day, people in the United States are heavily influenced by media, and a lot of those chronically online folks are influencing much further and much faster than anything else. So much so that it's starting to move outside of the online spaces, and it is showing up offline.
Did you say? Fuck the women. Fuck the women. What?
No, wait. We love women. We love women. We love women.
Not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody. No.
Okay,
yeah, fuck it. Yeah, man. Preach.
And it's just honestly one of those really strong examples of how these attitudes are spilling out into the world. My 7-year-old niece had another 7-year-old tell her that if she didn't do what he wanted her to do, he was going to grape her. 7. Whether we like it or not, the discourse is spilling offline. And rather than pretending certain things happen online and online only, what would getting control of that narrative look like? In this day and age, the podcast has become the barber shop? What if those barbershops became centers of political and emotional education again? This is kind of my call to arms, I'm realizing. What if more boys were able to see and believe that power could look like more than control and shame and fear? What would it look like if we saw more frequently these good men show how power can be drawn from stillness and awareness? What if emotional honesty was the flex? What if people had visibility into a very real form of manhood that's not measured by who you can dominate, but by who feels safer when you walk into the room? That exists. That is a thing that is in existence. And yeah, what if more of those men started podcasts that weren't just smoke and mirrors and misogyny and, bad experiences from high school? What if they use their voices to heal instead of harm? What I've noticed in my time on this rock is that a lot of times when someone is actually genuinely good, they don't think about what they're doing, they just do it. It's not because it's transactional or they're trying to prove something or they're trying to make money off of you, which I think makes it hard for people to realize that what they are doing is something worth sharing. All that yapping to say, if you're a man watching this, maybe it's time to hit record. Okay? Not to rant, but to reflect. Maybe share some lessons. Talk about the time you pushed back in that group chat. Talk about the time that you had to stop hanging out with somebody because they were just being a little bit too aggressive or weird to the ladies. Mentor a younger guy. Create the digital real estate. Pass down the recipes. What's stopping you from using your voice? Maybe starting a podcast with your equally yoked homies. Pick up the mic. Please say something worth hearing, I beg of you. And if you're not a man, and you're like me, very aware of the presence of really good men, 1, go hug them if you can and express your appreciation for their existence. But 2, how do we help good men feel safe being visible? How can we create space for the good men around us to step forward? How do we shift the spotlight to those who are already doing the work? Because they're out there. And because there's really no way that I can accept. No one should be accepting that if you happen to like your wife or the women that are around you, or if you're someone who is modeling growth, well, that makes you a simp or a panderer and not a happy, healthy man filled with love, which seems to be a much better way to go about spending your time on this rock, if I must say so myself. If you're watching this, Dad, I know that you will call me when you see this, but until then, good day, Father. I love you. Thank you for giving me the map and presenting me with the reality that good men do in fact exist, that they aren't rare Pokemon, and the proof is in the pudding. So Penny, for your thoughts on my take this week that the men who are doing the work don't usually podcast, but maybe they should, because the world needs to see more of it. Stay woke, stay kind, stay curious, comrades, and I will see you in the next one.